as we conclude, here's what just happened. Summary. If Judaism is a lie, the original lie had to have taken the form of either past, present, or future. The future lie, someday God will speak to your descendants, but God has not yet spoken, has no evidence anywhere in the paleobiological, the archaeological record. We don't find any group of people ever saying such a thing, right? The belief amongst Orthodox Jews was always God spoke, not that he hasn't spoken yet, but someday he will speak, so it's probably not the future lie that started Judaism. The present lie requires people to believe something incredible. It requires that the charismatic cult leader said to them, you all heard God speak, and they accepted that and they told their kids that. People are dumb, but they're not that dumb. Applewhite theorem. If a charismatic cult leader came to people and said past lie, there was Moses, then there was a gap, then Fred. He can't say Moses and a continuous line all the way down to your parents, because you could check that. So you'll have to say Moses, gap, Fred. Then there would be a tradition about a gap and Fred, but there's no tradition about a gap and Fred. So it turns out the past, the present, and the future lies could never have worked. It would never have produced this mythology about mass revelation. And if that doesn't impress you, you can always ask whatever theory somebody comes up with to explain the genesis of Judaism. If it's reasonable, why wasn't there another group who came up with this? I'll conclude with a story. I gave this lecture years ago here in Israel. After the lecture, a fellow came up to me and he said to me, in my lectures, I always try to point out the hole in my lecture, the weakness in my argument. Today, the weakness that I'm pointing out to you is that I have proven nothing. It's not proof. You could always argue back. You could say, well, the Jews were the luckiest people in history. They got away with the lie. No one else got away with it. Yeah, it's unlikely, but okay. If you want to believe in a 1 in a trillion shot, it's possible. So in the old days, there was another hole in my theory, which is that you cannot make judgments about what religions believe based on looking at texts, because all religions have oral traditions. So therefore, in order to know what 165 major religious movements believed, I had to interview people from 165 religious families. There was one group I did not interview anybody from. It's the oldest continuous religion in human history. It's not Zoroastrianism. It predates Zoroastrianism. It's actually Hare Krishna, but not the Hare Krishna from America. It's the Hare Krishna that's in India, and they didn't proselytize, so they never spread beyond India. And the ones who came to America changed the religion in very significant ways. The Hare Krishna in India, I never interviewed anybody from, and I used to conclude my lecture by saying that if there's a group who believes in mass revelation besides the Jews, maybe you'll find it in Hare Krishna. If you find it in Hare Krishna, then it's happening twice in history. Maybe it's a natural thing. A guy comes up to me after the lecture and he says to me that you don't have to go to India anymore to interview Hare Krishna. They're in Tel Aviv. So I said, the Hare Krishna in Tel Aviv have got to be the Americans because the Indian Hare Krishna don't proselytize. He said, they are the original Indian. So I didn't believe it. I made the phone call, tracked the place down, made the phone call, got on the phone to the director of outreach. The director of outreach, right, is already suspicious because he's the director of outreach, speaks with a thick Brooklyn accent. So I said to him, you're the American Hare Krishna. He says, no, I'm the original Indian Hare Krishna. I said, could you explain the accent? He said, yeah. He said, my parents were secular Jews living in New York. Like any intelligent secular Jew living in New York who's looking for spirituality, they went to India. In India, they discovered Hare Krishna. They became Hare Krishna. I was born to two Hare Krishna parents in India. When I picked up English, I picked it up in the house, which is why I speak with a thick Brooklyn accent, because I got it from my parents. I believed him. It was a reasonable story. I said, I got to meet with you. Not a problem. I went down to Tel Aviv. I sat across from him. This fellow tells me that he believes in the whole thing. It's all true. I said, listen, I just need to know one thing. What's your revelation narrative? Tell me your revelation narrative. How did your religion start? So he said, we don't do it like that. We share. So first, you tell me your revelation narrative. Oh, by the way, this guy's name was Shrudlu, and I can't tell you his real last name, but it sounded like Goldberg. Yeah? In a moment, you'll understand why I can't tell you his real last name. Shrudlu Goldberg says to me, tell me your revelation narrative. So I couldn't believe it. I'm talking to a Jew, and he wants to know, how do I know that Judaism is true? So I didn't mean to take a human trophy home, but I let loose with both barrels, and I explained the whole thing that I explained to you in the last hour. And I said to him, so you see that Judaism has got to be true, because there's no other mass revelation. So he's nonplussed. And at the end, he says, okay, now would you like to hear my story? I said to him, I just demonstrate to you that Judaism is true. What are you talking about? So he says, Mr. Kelemen, well, it might be true that your religion, Judaism, is true. It's also true that my religion, Hare Krishna, is true. I said, you couldn't know that because yours started with one person. Or two people. So he said, no, Mr. Kelemen, we also have a mass revelation. I said, what are you talking about? He said, haven't you ever read the Bhagavad-Gita? I said, you're darn right, I've read the Bhagavad-Gita. There's nothing there about a mass revelation. He says, no, but we have an oral tradition that at the Battle of the Bhagavad-Gita, it was a battle that took place between two nations, our chief god, Krishna, descended in the sight of all the people. And he said, all the warriors who were there heard as he spoke. And he said, it was just like you. It blew their souls out of their bodies. They all dropped dead. It was exactly like the story that happened at Mount Sinai. And he said, more than that, you've read the Bhagavad-Gita. How many warriors were there? I said, wow, that's interesting. It was between 1 million and 3 million warriors. And they all heard God speak. He said, so you see, Mr. Kelemen, that Hare Krishna is also true. We also have a mass revelation. I said to him, Shrilu, tell me the story one more time. He said, two groups of warriors, they're all battling. Krishna descends, speaks to all of them. They all drop dead. I said, what happened next? He said, what do you mean? I said, they all dropped dead. What happened after that? They laid there. So I said, they didn't get back up again? He said, no, they were dead. So I said, well, if they were all dead, how do you know the story? She said that many years later, this God came to one person and told him, and then he told everybody else. Okay, what I'm giving to you are two documents. One is my little experiment, and the other is something that explains the bomb, because the bomb was a little bit complicated, and the two of these will be very helpful to you. Have a good day.